Hey guys, on this episode of EdTech, I'm going to be talking with Tim Seeley, an adjunct professor over at Columbia College in Chicago. We're going to be talking about pre-COVID teaching styles, during the pandemic teaching styles, and where we go from here. All this and more on EdTech.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is EdTech. Ask a faculty member.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Atlas IED, innovative audio solutions for every business environment.
This is EdTech, the monthly higher ed tech podcast. As always, I'm your host, Bill O'Donnell, and for this month, we're actually joined by a friend and associate of mine, Mr. Tim Seeley. How are you, Tim?
I'm happy to be here. Good to talk to you, Bill.
All right. For those of you who don't know, Tim is he has multiple irons in the fire. He's a writer, he is a teacher, he is an artist, and, from time to time, I tend to see him at various shows and everything. But for this one, this is, Tim is a adjunct faculty member over at Columbia College over in Chicago. And for this one, the point of the podcast for this one is that we're talking about how how faculty have actually been affected by COVID and everything. Now, primarily this is for higher ed tech managers, but as always, as I've said on the podcast, folks aren't coming to XYZ college or university for the technology unless it happens to be like MIT or it's a medical school, which in that case, shades of gray are literally life or death. But, the whole point of it is that our job is to help facilitate things with faculty, help them get their content across and everything. So, I figured I'd chat with Tim about, how things have been pre-COVID, post, during the pandemic, and, as we're hopefully seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, if that's not the oncoming train. So, anyways, first and foremost, Tim, if you want to just introduce yourself to the folks, how long you've been teaching so far and everything, and we'll just kind of scat from there.
Yeah, my name is Tim Seeley. Like you said, I'm primarily a freelance writer and artist in the comic book industry, but for about a year and a half, I've been teaching at Columbia as an adjunct professor. I teach in the animation department, essentially the interactive media department there, which is the sort of video game students, the animation students. And I do a cartooning class. I do, several of those. And then I also teach storyboarding and drawing for animation.
Oh, fair enough. So, so for just a quick backup, were you teaching these classes in person or was this already online?
It was in person for 3 months. Oh. And I had originally taken the job because I work at home and I was starting to get I'd done it for a year and I was starting to get kind of loopy working at home. And I just, it's not my thing to be by myself like all day. I'm just not that person. I'm a pretty social person. So, and I had been working in a studio before this, but I moved back home to we bought a house and I have a kid. So I was working at home and then this potential to teach came up and I was like, it'll get me out of the house. That'll be amazing. And then I go out and I was out in the world for 3 months and then I came back and now I've been here for another year. It didn't work out, the best laid plans and all that sort of thing. And so now I have been teaching on Zoom longer than I was teaching in person by a good shot, by about 3 times.
Well, yeah. So, and that's one of those interesting dynamics because a lot of schools have always said, oh, yes, we have a great online program and we have this. And COVID hit, and that was a real put up or shut up moment for a lot of schools. Just to give you an example, in my case, we had been kind of swapping out our like little in-room document cameras to make them, amazingly enough, like these like 4K webcams with a mic built in. And the pandemic hit, and our IT department suddenly came to me and was like, okay, how do we, the president has said we have to make all these rooms Zoom capable. And I'm like, well, okay, that's fun interpretation. And they're like, well, okay, how do we do it in the most cost-effective way? And I showed them these things, and We ordered about 250 of them or so. And, did it work? Yeah, it was good enough. But these things are really meant for like a room probably about the size of your office and anything. And in certain cases, we ended up putting them in like the animation labs. We ended up putting them in auditoriums, which, yeah, that kind of worked. But, it was one of these like, just here, guys, you're going to have to jump and do this all on Zoom. And it really turned into a, you watched like newer faculty who were very used to doing like hybrid or online learning already, because for them they're like, yeah, we've built course shells, and I learned on course shells, present company included. So they're like, yeah, we already get this. And then you ended up watching like the really, well, as I would put it, very well seasoned. You can use whatever other adjectives you want to use there. Faculty. Yeah. You had the faculty who are very much like, who moved my cheese, and they're suddenly getting told, yeah, you have to do everything online, and they're like, but I live off of like transparencies and things like this, and I'm kind of going, yeah, and so we offered a mix to them. We said, listen, you can come in in person on campus, and the classroom will be empty. Basically, it's like your own like little production studio. Right. But if anything goes kaboom, we can only do so much remotely. So it was definitely a holy cow. This was baptism by fire. So
I definitely think about that. I mean, because for me, transferring, doing what I do, I had all my stuff digitally, right? I had PDFs of all my presentations, and I had all that stuff saved online, and I would have to assume that it took about 3 weeks for us to transition from when the shutdown occurred, mid-March, to when we came back, which was like the end of March, so about 3 weeks. That they basically said, like, okay, transfer everything you have to, online appropriate materials. So if I didn't have anything that I had to turn into, from a transparency to a digital version. I did, all my stuff was digital, and I'm not like a complete Luddite, but sometimes. But I mean, the transition for me wasn't that difficult. I really do sort of think of the people who were so much more sort of set to do something in person that had to transition that, because I didn't have to. I had so much of my stuff was digital anyway, but it had to be really difficult for other people. So, I mean, this was my classroom, right? All I had to do was change my background so that it was like interesting to look at, and that was it. Like, it didn't take me a lot of work to do this.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that, and this is one of the big debates that we've had with faculty and everything, because periodically we have like certain committees where they do like teaching across the curriculum, or one of the ones I get dragged into is the one called learning spaces committees. And it suddenly turned into, okay, how do we invoke hybrid learning with these things? And the number one complaint I got from the faculty really didn't have a whole lot. Well, it had things to do with the technology, but it was more of the online based. And I'm going, well, this is more of a policy thing. So where I'm going to put this to you is the number one complaint we had from faculty is that a lot of the students would just show up, and you'd just see like their initials in the Zoom meeting, and that was it. And they were like, okay, are they actually there? This is something that ranges from the K through 12 realm, but in higher ed, it's really a lot more difficult, because depending on the college and things of that nature, like my school, primarily it's a lot of students who they're the first in their family to attend college. So they're working students and things like that. So they are not always the most forward about, here, I'm going to show you where I am and this kind of thing. But on the faculty side, they're like, no, I need to see you. Like, our language folks were vehement about this, to the point where they actually went and got specialty and they have them now. They actually have specialty. They almost look like a half a Jason Voorhees mask, but it's clear plastic because they want everyone to see the enunciations and everything in the classroom.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, well, go ahead.
Well, I just, we anticipated that this would be difficult because, Zoom is just a wall of boxes. And then if it doesn't contain a face in it, it's just initials. So, the anticipation at the school was, it may be difficult to tell if your students are even here. Like hypothetically, someone could come in, turn their camera on and jet, right? And just leave the camera on and then you wouldn't know. Right. But on the other hand, you can't really say like, hey, you need to turn your camera on because, some people got sent home to situations where, they're in places that they don't want to share what the location looks like. Maybe they're uncomfortable with that. And so you can't enforce that either. And so I didn't want, for my classes, I basically said, I will be on camera all the time because I feel like we have to have some kind of, face. So, but you don't have to be. But when the students do, the other thing I kind of said like is if we do something where we have a discussion, and if you want to be able to like discuss it, it would be easier for us to understand what you're saying if we can see your face. But I don't require it. So we're sort of treating it like a presentation. But on the other hand, it's just too hard to sort of if you're in class, you have the expectation that you are in a physical space and you prepared for that. And you put on the clothes that you wanted people to see, and et cetera, et cetera. But in the situation that COVID put us in, like it's just unfair, I think, to force anyone to be on camera, right? Like that's nothing any of us signed up for.
Oh yeah, none of it, a lot of us. It's funny when all of a sudden, and that's the thing too. Keep in mind, and this is something. Once again, I'm just kind of this is like something for a lot of the tech managers and everything. Is that these are students who are coming right out of class, like they're coming right out of high school. Some of them, might be super seniors or what have you, but for them, it's still a little bit of a transition period in which they're suddenly aware of all of a sudden they see themselves on camera, and in certain cases, they can actually hear themselves going through their own headphones and everything. Yeah. And there's a lot of self-confidence stuff that's still going on, and. Yeah, and I'm not knocking anyone. Believe me, like, if you were asking me how I was like during my high school and certain years of college, I would have told you you could flash freeze me or put me in suspended animation, and I think I would have still turned out the same. But it's one of those things. I get it, and especially because because kind of going back to what you said is the fact that for a lot of us, we were all like isolated in our homes for months upon months. And, I'll admit up front, I went to go visit my partner down in Brazil back in December and everything. And, I had multiple negative COVID tests and everything. And my work was still like, yeah, you have to self-isolate for, at least 2 weeks. And I'm like, okay. And I won't lie. Like, even though, I'm like, I'm clean, guys, I'm cool, it's this. They're like, yeah, you still have to isolate. And self-isolating and just, doing complete remote work and not being able to see folks, it can definitely do some damage. And I think that's one of those big concerns I have with at least with the students that are going to be coming through within the next, couple of years and everything is at least from an online learning and a classroom experience level. We're going to have, like, Tim, it wouldn't surprise me if, like, your college said, hey, Tim, for, like, the next, 3 to 4 years or so, you are going to have to make your stuff all hybrid. And if students don't feel comfortable, they'll be able to remotely come in and everything.
I think that's true. I mean, the thing I think has been interesting to watch about this is that the online part of this is not as good as the in-person. It just is not. It's not. So this technology is good, right? The Zoom is good technology. Going back, let's say 5 years, if COVID had hit, we wouldn't have been able to do this. We wouldn't have had this like easy consumer access meeting software. But we had it, which is great. But it's very clear to me it's not nearly as good. And also, for me, I think the most interesting thing of this is how this affects sort of the mental health of the students, because the stress I see on them is so much different these past 2 semesters than it was the first semester when I saw them in person. And it's just like trying to focus, get all these things done. Part of the problem is that, we have less studio time because we like in-class studio time to work on things. So the stress on them is so much higher. You know, like one of the things I implemented this semester was just one of our classes was we just had one-on-one mental health checks. Like, let's just talk. Let's see how you're doing. Uh, because if I was in person, I would be able to say, hey, it looks like, hey, you're having some tough times. You want to meet up later and just tell me what's going on and what you need help with. And because I can't do that because I can't see anyone, so just implementing it across the board, like, and look, it's still on Zoom, but it's still like a chance to be like, hey, this is not quite like office hours, but this is just me saying, what can I help you with specifically? And I did find like some of the kids were so stressed out, like they would have tears in their eyes, right? Like,
Yeah.
that it was so hard to do this. And, that's the interesting thing. This is good technology. It is not how we should do education.
No, the biggest thing that I've always been an advocate for, and just to give you some background on this one, I have been at William Patterson University, I have to think about this now, 7 years? Wow. But one of the biggest things I learned from being in the higher ed realm is that you have formal learning spaces, your classrooms, your laboratories, your lecture halls, all that kind of stuff. I tend to view that as like, here, you're having a proper meal. Okay. And folks can indulge themselves and eat up on that and everything. But usually after you have like a good meal and everything, you normally tend to have like, an espresso or dessert or something to kind of let it all digest down. And for that, a lot of the students tend to go to like, study rooms or group spaces and what we call like informal learning spaces.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing during the pandemic is, guess what? You ain't got none of that.
Right.
And that's the thing. It just kind of comes back to like, and you and I have chatted a little bit about this, but by and far, our students are social creatures. And one of the biggest things that we had actually noticed, at least at our school, is that we had been doing what were called active learning classrooms, which was basically like they were tables of like 6 or 8 students, and it was more group-based work and everything. So the students could actually like all talk with each other and kind of like, the instructor would come by and say, this is the problem, this, and this. And then it'd kind of float around the room, and the other students would all kind of do group work and talk with each other. And it made a little bit more sense for everything because it was, it was no longer like, well, Tim said it was this. Well, yeah, but when Tim said this, I interpreted it as that. So therefore, you should go it from this, and this degree. And honestly, it actually showed an improvement in grades because the students were actually able to kind of, once again, it's a social group thing. And once again, with the pandemic, it's like the closest that came to it was the fact that Zoom went, oh, here, guys, we have breakout rooms. And I'm like, cool. I mean, I understand the point of that, but.
Well, the thing that the kids did sort of as a just adaptation of this situation was that that they would run a Discord chat along with the class, which I was not part of, which I was grateful not to be part of. And it was like you should have that for yourselves, right? Like they would have, they would start a Discord. I don't even know enough about Discord to tell you how it works, and I don't want to. It's that to be for the students. So like the things that they should be able to talk amongst, it's exactly what you said, that they can reinterpret that what I told them, that they can reinterpret it and translate it among themselves. And or discuss it or say it's wrong or whatever, or complain about me. I want them to have that place that they can do that I shouldn't know about, right? Because they would have that in the real world. They would be able to walk out of class and go to the next building, and they would have that transition room to bullshit, or they would have the cafe, or they would have some other space, which they don't have.
Yeah.
So I thought that Discord thing, and obviously it comes from video game culture and stuff, so my school in particular would have that, but that seems to me to be like, if we're going to continue to not have on-campus stuff, is that we need to have the kids, because the other thing with like a Zoom chat, for instance, if you have the chat on the side, that's recorded, right? It's recorded like the Zoom chat and uploaded to the cloud. Yep. So especially in a world like now where you say something and perhaps it works against you, all that recorded Zoom chat, you don't want, it's not fair that you have everything that you said recorded. So I always tell the students, like, just so you know, that is recorded. So definitely use it for class discussion, but don't use it for personal stuff because it's going to get uploaded to the cloud next to the Zoom recording of the class. But like their Discord thing, they can do whatever they want there. And that's what I just feel like they need that space. Like that's a very important part of this to me. And if we have to do this again next semester, God help we don't, I will definitely be like, hey, beginning of semester, everyone, you guys get a Discord server set up for yourselves, and I will not have anything to do with it.
Yeah, it's giving them their own like little sense of privacy. The other thing, and this is something that once again we're doing at my school, and I'm kind of looking, going, kind of like a Barry Bonds moment, is that we are now having like we have Qualtrics surveys that go out, and they're like, yeah, here, this is how you're going to rate the professor and everything, and I'm going, guys, like, we really shouldn't, like, this year and part of last year. I'm like, you take it with a grain of salt, because I'm like, you're going to be dealing with faculty who got thrown in online.
Yeah,
it's a baptism by fire bit for some of them. I'm like, listen, I'm not saying that professor evaluations aren't important. I'm simply saying this was uncharted territory, and I can say, from my own perspective, like my school's already said, oh yeah, come the fall, everybody's back in class. Everybody's back on campus. And they're like, they also went, oh yeah, and we're going to be ending remote work from home. And I'm just looking, going, yeah, officially They say that. We'll see how that goes.
And so the case counts hopefully will be down by September. Here, the policy for my school is that all the kids would be vaccinated. That to return to campus, they have to be vaccinated. So I would feel like that would be the safest place in America to be, right? If I'm working at a place where all the people I deal with are required to be vaccinated, I'm better off than the person working at Starbucks, right? Yeah. As far as my exposure goes, and I'd be vaccinated as well. So I feel safe. But I mean, who knows what the situation will be? Like, so, it may have to be a thing like you mentioned, that we may have to have some kind of partial hybrid thing where we have to have the ability to like go home in case there's like an outbreak or something. I mean, yeah. Wouldn't be possible with a certain amount of vaccinations, but who knows, right? Like, it's just such a shit shoot.
The biggest thing I think that's going to come out of this is a lot of schools who didn't have an online program. They are going through like they're looking and going, saying, "Oh, holy crap! We've actually needed to we need to actually invest in folks who understand." Like, in my case, my school is forever chained to Blackboard. The moment they unload that, I will be dumbfounded and amazed. But there's other schools that have like Canvas or Kalutra or Moodle. Yeah. You guys use what? Canvas?
Canvas, yeah. And that was not a thing I was familiar with before I started. And now, not only did when I was using it in person, it was one thing, but now I have Canvas to a degree of which 10 times what I was when I was using it in person. But speaking of baptism by fire, but now I know that program inside upside down, right? Like, unfortunately.
So this is the thing that I always, we always try to do about this. We try to be proactive with the faculty because, case in point, in my case, one time before I got sent out into the desert, I had to go down to South Carolina, Columbia, South Carolina. And the car rental folks said, hey, we only have this one car. It's a white Chevy Aveo. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And I get in it, and I look down for a second, and I go, oh, it's stick. And I didn't know how to drive stick. And you notice why, like, that was back in 2012. Notice how well I remember that car because, you remember it, but for all the wrong reasons. And it's, I'm not knocking Canvas, and I'm not knocking Blackboard. There are folks who take to it like fish to water, and then there's some of us who practically drown and then go, oh right, okay, yeah, I know how to do this, this, and this, but don't make me learn any more than this. And,
right.
Yeah.
I mean, we're just lucky we had those things to some degree because if we had a mass pandemic like this in 1987, I mean, right, we would have had no way. There would have been no school.
Oh no.
It just would have been impossissible. And so
you would have been buried with correspondence letters.
Yeah,
not even.
Exactly. It would have been so hard to do, and so we're so lucky to have the technology. But also, I think the technology then comes with, we have to ask this question: like, could we just go all in on this? And I think the answer is no, right?
Yeah.
It just wasn't, we can't. it's really good for the situation that we found ourselves in, and we're lucky. But it's really bad for the product of education itself. It's just not that good, you know.
Yeah, the biggest thing I've noticed throughout all of this is it's good for students who are a little bit more, I'm not going to say timid, but they're not the most they're a little more self-conscious than the other students and everything. But as far as faculty, it's been a real learning curve for the faculty because, all of a sudden it went, oh, well, how do I get this stuff onto here? But I teach primarily over the whiteboard and this and that. And we go, well, you can do it this way and this way and this way. And it was just like watching a learning curve. But the biggest thing that I got out of Zoom was they're like, yeah, it turns out, yeah, Zoom is the entire crux of everything. And there are some things that Zoom does very well. There are some things that folks looked and went and said, oh yeah, we have to work on this. Now, I will say this, on the animation side, I've actually had to, deal with, we've had folks who are like, no, I'm going to do my thing via WebEx, or I'm going to do my thing via Blackboard Collaborate Ultra. And we tried to tell our art department, they're like, just go Zoom. Please, just do Zoom. Reason being was Blackboard Collaborate Ultra for the longest time was still doing 4:3 aspect ratio. And I know you're looking going like, who does that? Blackboard. But
it wasn't intended for this.
Yeah. Yeah. No, this whole year has been, well, it could hypothetically do all this. And this past year has been, it's weird for me to suddenly put it, but I'm like, yeah, this has been like certain things have been a major lessons learned event. The lessons being, oh yeah, no, we can totally do an online school. You can. There's a different type of student that's going to do all online versus who's going to want to sit their butts down in the class and actually use, like in your case, use the Cintiq or a Surface or, a Bamboo or something like that. The biggest one that I've noticed is like some of our sciences have done really well with it. Our math department, English, they're all like, oh yeah, this is great. And in fact, there's even been, some advancements in which they've actually had this thing called e-glass, which you ever see in it. Pretty much, they just took a webcam and put it behind a sheet of plexiglass that has LEDs around the rim and everything. So you can actually write out the grammar, or write out an equation and everything. And the camera is also is already mirrored, so folks can actually read the equation as you would read it, kind of thing. But that's all good and cool. That I've kind of the more I watched it in action, the more I went, this is good for a how-to video. This is not really designed for, and they were pitching it like, oh yeah, we're totally going to do this as, you can do this in class. And I'm like, the students aren't going to want to see it as, you're literally like, here, oh yeah, well, we're going about this and I'm going to show you grammatically how this works out. But like I said, it's definitely been a lessons learned thing. So that being said, we're kind of coming up to the top of the hour here with this one. Tim, just your final thoughts with everything. Like, for you, like, as I say, if your school suddenly said, "Hey, Tim, like the next semester or two, you're going to be doing online again," will you grin and bear it? Will you be like, "No, listen, I'm going to break into the animation studio if I can, I gotta get out." Or will, you just be like, you know what, I'm going to ritz up my office even further.
I mean, I think what it comes down to is, unfortunately, I'm probably now more comfortable doing things online, which I don't want that to be the case, but it is the case. So if I had to, I could do it, and I probably would be better at it. But as, I feel like the reason to take the job was to be around students and to interact with people and be creatively, that was the reason. So it would bum me out. And I would also just really, I would fear for how that will affect the students to have to do this again. If you're a college kid now and you've just spent an entire year away from the actual part of college that's worth going to college, I feel bad that you have to keep doing that. I don't know if it's good. Going to college without getting to go to college seems like a really big punishment.
and that's the thing I'm going to end with it on this one is that for us, a lot of the times we put in this tech because we want the students to be on campus. We want them to actually bond with the place, because otherwise they just kind of tend to look at it and go, okay, cool. I'm going to William Patterson right now. Yeah, you know what? I noticed, and I'm not knocking any of these schools or anything, but there are schools that are a little bit more competitive as far as tuition and everything else goes. And they go, well, if I'm getting just charged online credits, can I just transfer my stuff here? Yeah. And you hit the nail on the head, though. It's the actual college experience, because listen, you can take all the theory courses you want, but unless you're actually actively interacting with folks and actually, going through and doing the actual practicum part, it's, once again, it's theory, but theory is only so good until you actually, hit the road with it and everything.
Agreed.
So, yeah. Agreed. So that being said, folks, as I say, sorry. That's about all we have for this time. Tim, where can the fine folks find you at? As I say, if you want, you don't have to put out whatever you don't want to put out, but
I'm on Twitter at Hackin' Tim Seeley. I'm on Instagram at Tim Seeley. That's Seeley. And I do lots of stuff in the comic space. So if you ever shop into a comic book store, you can find me just about anywhere.
Yeah. There you go. I'm Bill O'Donnell. You can happily find me, usually haranguing this other individual on the other side of the podcast here. Aside from that, you can also find me on LinkedIn. As always, this is EdTech, part of the AVNation family of podcasts. As always, this is EdTech.